you prepared to challenge demon power and say, listen, I've moved into the place where the Apostle Paul was when he said, I glory in tribulation, in necessities, in reproaches.
Welcome to the realest show out, where we talk about the latest issues and topics to affect our communities. Do not forget to like, do not forget to subscribe, and do not forget to leave a comment down below. Today we have a very special guest. If you would like to introduce yourselves for us, please.
Hello, Jermaine. My name is Jennifer Foster.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us, Jenny. Absolute pleasure to have you. First question, do you think young people are being supported?
Well, that's an interesting question because I think society thinks young people are being supported, and in a way they are being supported, but the problem is that the way society sees support is actually not very helpful because people are so into their little boxes. What often happens is a young person or even an adult is helped to do well within their little box. So because they're so interested in just being like that, they're not able to connect or to reach out or to show their meaning and purpose, because you need other people to connect with to do that. So a lot of the help out there is very much to do with how they are rather than how to develop them as people and to connect with others.
I think that's a really good point. It's not really meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
Opposed to, it's just, look, this is an intervention, this is what we've got for you.
Yeah, it's very fragmented. It's very fragmented. So someone might come along with a certain issue and they'll deal with that by itself, and that will be that, rather than looking at the whole person and seeing where that issue came from and teaching that person how to build up their own good feels in themselves. And once they can do that, they can then connect to other people because they feel like they can. Whereas when it's all about you in a fragmented way, people tend to feel isolated because they think there's something wrong with them. You know, there's something wrong with me and I can't do this and I can't do that. And a therapist might well help you and they do have their place, but just doing that won't actually help you come out of yourself and realise that you can create change just by being you. And that's what we need to do. I think the whole society needs to do that, because if one young person does the work, but there's no one out there to connect because everyone else is in their boxes, not communicating, who can they connect with?
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. And especially with things like social media and all that sort of thing, people are spending so much time on computers and screens that programs you to be what I call in the mind. So all the time you're looking for that positive stuff through the mind. So when you're not on that, because your neuron paths have been like reprogrammed to just want that all the time, like an addiction, when you don't have that, you kind of sit there and feel a bit bored and lost. So again, how can you begin to make relationships with other people if you're feeling lost? And I think older people like myself, well, everyone needs to do this, because the older people need to connect to the younger people, you know, and help them. We need to help them and show them the way, even though we've made loads and loads of mistakes, obviously, but we need to work together to create this social change, you know.
I think that's really important, working together collectively, which brings me on to my next question, question 2. Do you feel that the government, schools and educational services care about the future of our young people?
Again, I mean, yes, in the sense of they've got all these policies and procedures and targets and goals and all this sort of thing. And unfortunately, there can be really well-intentioned people working in these places, really well-intentioned, and really, some of them are really talented at dealing with people. But again, because it's all set on some sort of target or goal, it turns into a bit of a sausage machine again. And if you don't fit into their tick box, you're thrown out the system. So there is a channel that is supposed to help, which is great. But again, if you use that method in society to help people, you just get sausages out of the sausage machine. And really, we want creative people. We want people who have a talent and have, you know, want to be sort of create new ideas and move society forward in a good way. And you can't really sort of train that. You can train someone to nurture themselves and to be themselves, which is sort of what I do. But and then once they can do that, then you can teach them the skills. But what you can't do is train people to be, you know, their full potential. Because again, it's all about the mind and is your mindset good? And although you need a good mindset, your mindset is only part of you. There's a massive, great part of you that is missed if you're just looking at your mindset. So I think a lot of the time, again, it's fragmented, the help that is there. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, and it seems to be random, to be honest. And a lot of it is focused on the mind, which is not really the main part of you.
And you've made some really outstanding points, which brings me on to my next question, question 3. If we was to, before we get into question 3, really just touch on the importance of nurturing young people's abilities and creating a safe space so that they're able to grow. Is very important. And when that's not in place, young people, like you said, we're developing young people that are not actually able to, you know, create and sustain a future within society.
I mean, I think one of the main problems is, and this has been going on for probably about 15, 20 years, is the gradual takeover of technology. That is a real problem. I'm not saying technology is the problem, because technology can be really useful, right? But the reliance on it to get a good emotion from. So people are relying on technology to get what I call mind energy. You could call it motivation, you could call it a buzz, you could call it So when you get a like or something, in the work I do, I say it's like a fire. So if I'm like, yeah, Jermaine, you look really good, you this, that and the other, you're like, yeah, bang, bang, bang. And that's like fire energy. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's very, very short-lived. And when I stop saying that to you, and no one else is saying that to you, you're like, well, where's that attention gone? Where's that attention gone? And that's where it can get quite dangerous, because then you might look for attention in another way. So we'll park that. So if people, and I say young people, but it's everyone really, are getting all this emotional attention from a technology, again, we're interesting creatures, because our brain pattern does change to do what is easiest. It does what is easiest. So if that's the easiest way for me to get motivation, that's what my brain over a period of time will keep doing, right? We'll keep doing that. So because of that, the person it can't kind of generate their own meaning and purpose from within themselves, because their brain kind of doesn't know how to do it, because they've kind of been trained by all this technology to do that, to do it that way. So I think that's a really that is a crisis. I think that's a crisis.
It's very important. Question number 3: what needs to be done so that young people have a future?
What needs to be done is that I think the whole of society has to take ownership of this, not just young people. You can't just put young people in a box and say, like, you know, we got to help them, because they're not in a box. We're all people, and we all need to help each other. Like, young people can help older people, and older people can help younger people. We've all got a value, we've all got a talent, we've all got a skill, and we need to work with each other to bring that out. Not to see it as a separation. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my work, about how society has just become so separated, and we're all in our boxes, we can't connect. And once we can't connect, we can't create good feelings for each other, because we can't connect. And it's all about, am I better than you? Are you better than me? Or whatever. And it's setting up a scenario where there is potential conflict. So most of society and most of what happens is that it's the setup is one that could create conflict, and we want to get rid of that. That should be gone, that was in the past, and we need to everyone take responsibility for we can create a better future. I mean, we can. This is what we're here for, and we need to do it and not think it's someone else's problem or someone else's job. So I think the best thing we can do to help young people is for obviously appropriate support for them, which is what we can talk about, but also for everyone else to reach out to them and to say, what can I do to help you?
It kind of reminds me of an African proverb. It says that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
So all of us collectively being responsible, being accountable, I feel that's really important in terms of how can we move forward and moving forward. That's
right, and you can't do it on your own. I mean, I'm a single parent, and it's really hard. It's really difficult, and people kind of sort of sit in their own little space and sort of observe you doing your life, which kind of makes me laugh a little bit, because if we all work together, you could solve it like that. You really could. And the media, the mainstream news and all this sort of thing says, oh, there's problems because of this breakup and that breakup and people are, on the poverty line and all this, which is true. But the reason it's true is because people aren't helping each other. If I've got things and you haven't got things, we need to share. Yeah. And then we'll both be fine, because I will feel good because I'm caring for you. You'll feel good because obviously you've got what you need, and we'll both feel better. And that's what's disappeared, and that's, as you say, that's how villages and communities used to be that's how they were. And nowadays it's like you're in your own little space, your own little house, and so long as you're all right, that's good enough. And oh, by the way, I'm going to go and have a nice holiday. Nothing wrong with nice holidays, but how can you go and have a nice holidays if you know your neighbour is struggling? That's my question, And there's charities out there to help, yes, but if you give money to charities, then the charities are following their, sadly, often tick box criteria, and a lot of people go through the net. They fall through the net. The people who need the help the most often can't access it.
It's very true. And it's like a lot of what you're talking about, for me, I'm just getting, what comes to mind is like biblical principles. Yeah. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. And if you was to do that, society would be in a much better place. Yeah. And it also says two are better than one. Yeah. For two will have a greater interest, a greater return for their labour than one. Yes. So there's power in working together. That's right. And unification.
There is, and I talk a lot about that in my work, is that I say, and like, if you've got one and one, but they're separate, so you work for me and I give you £10, right? They're separate. And what you can do, though, is you just make 11. You just make like 11. So it's fair, but you just make 11. Whereas if you and I work together creatively, and we're not separated, but we work together creatively, then you can form two. And two is so much more powerful than just two ones. So it's like magic. And again, that's what I believe is the human soul. When two human souls work together, or three or four or five, you don't even know what you can create, because you can't even conceive it.
There's no end to what can be achieved.
Yeah, you can't even conceive it. It unfolds, and you just think, wow, how on earth did that happen?
How do we get it? How do we do this?
Yeah, but we just did it because we were just being ourselves in the kind and humble way. I talk about that a lot, in the kind and humble way, and play to each other's strengths. And support each other's weaknesses, and that it just magically unfolds then,
Brings me on to my next question. Why has the police allowed the relationship to fail between themselves and local communities, especially young people?
Well, again, I don't really know the answer to that as such, but it's definitely, they have failed. I mean, I guess a lot of it is perception, and again, what people see on the news and all that sort of stuff. And maybe the police idea of community sort of relations has maybe disappeared, because maybe they're spending more time on other stuff. I mean, there's a lot of crime nowadays that didn't used to be crime. So maybe they're focusing on other things, and maybe they're not there to be the local Bobby on their push bike, saying, hello, how are you doing? And it's all about, again, control and stopping you doing things, and that's all very negative. And negative breeds negative, doesn't it? Negative breeds negative, and it just, again, that grows. the more negative the police are, the more negative people perceive young people to be, the more they're going to think, oh, I'm going to have to get the police involved to do this. Whereas if we were a community, we could probably sort it out ourselves, you know.
Some would say that it's always been like that, so it will always be like that. What's your opinions on that? In terms of the relationship failing, the police not caring purposely, the historical records of the police brutality amongst ethnic minority communities, the amount of murders, young people, especially young black men dying in custody or dying in the police care, and not being addressed is a big fundamental. Why is that?
Well, again, you can. I mean, again, I don't. Who knows, right? I'm not the expert on that, right? But it's like you can legislate for that, you can pass laws for that, you can do all sorts of exercises to make sure the police have got proper training, etc., etc., etc. You can do all that. But I think sort of maybe what you're saying as well is that if the community started to work together, so they supported young black men or boys and the mothers.
Doesn't, and not necessarily, I'm not putting a skin colour, but necessarily ethnic minority. So it doesn't have to be, you could be Polish, you could be Russian, you could be Albanian. But when there's a stigma or stereotype perceived or given to you because you're not English per se, or British or white is what I'm trying to say basically.
Yeah, exactly. And what tends to happen, and tell me what you think of this, what tends to happen is that because the community doesn't welcome these people, the people tend to gang together because they've only got each other, you know. So then there's separation. So if everyone, you know, the white English opened their door and say, come round, let's talk to each other, let's learn about each other's past, let's be friends, you know. Then together you could support each other, and then maybe the police wouldn't have to be involved. Like,
we could do our own policing possibly, is what you're saying, in our communities, definitely.
That's what I'm trying to say.
But things like race, age and class, working class, these things would have to be eradicated, and we would have to be perceived, and when I say we, I'm talking about anybody who's economically challenged, comes from a place of deprivation. If we work together, like you're saying, collectively, and take colour out of the equation, and learn to see each other, like Martin Luther King said, to judge each other by the content of our character, not by the colour of our skin. Is fundamentally what we need to do.
Yes, it is. I think
Would you agree?
I do agree. I do think your colour and your race and your identity and nationality is important, mind you. I think that's important because that's part of who you are.
It's important, but not in terms of how I value as a person.
Exactly.
I don't feel that a person's value should be based on their colour.
No, it's...
Or they should be devalued because of colours.
That's right, yeah.
Particularly.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that together, again, I just think together, it's just like
sticking
amazing.
Together, yeah, it's important. And having these conversations.
Yes, and I think what you know, obviously you're a different colour to me, obviously, but we've often said together, what we can both bring to the table is much better than if we work separately.
Definitely, collectively, it's more effective being together.
Because we're different ages, we're different colours, we're different sexes,
different experiences.
we're different everything. But together, because I value that. You see, I value
as I value what
difference.
you bring and your differences.
I value
and I feel that's where the key is, valuing our differences, which is important.
Yes, not like what kind of sort of happens a little bit in society again, which I'm not sure about, is it's like, oh no, we're all the same. No, actually you're not all the same. You're not all the same.
Yeah, we have differences.
We need to value
but
the difference.
Can we appreciate each other's differences and value each other's differences?
But to do that, you need to be very confident in yourself, right? Otherwise you get scared and frightened and all that. So that's why, again, you need to do the work on yourself first.
And I feel like there is an identity crisis amongst our young people. Hence why they turn into gangs, turn to the streets, and looking to fill a void that's in them because of an identity crisis, not knowing who they are. Which brings me on to our next question. For those young people that are stereotyped by the government, police, institutions and educational services, and your personal experiences, what is the impact and the damage this causes? Well, it just
causes like fragmentation and downward spirals all over the place. You know, it just perpetuates what's already set up. Do you know what I mean?
Most definitely. Could you elaborate just for like the viewers and the people that maybe don't know exactly what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, when organisations and governments and people like that aren't really on the same page as what's good for a community, the collateral damage from not actually supporting people to do their best is massive, because people start to, again, all the money starts to go towards preventing, like crime in prisons and all this sort of thing. Whereas if that wasn't happening in the first place, we could use that money to do better things, couldn't we? Like, well, there's so many other things you could do.
Fund scholarships.
Yeah.
Support young entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Build social entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Internships. Free access to education.
Yeah.
More youth centres.
Yeah, yeah, and it would have a
supporting families,
and it would have a very positive
in these communities.
It would have a very positive dynamic without
ripple effect. It will have a wider effect on the community.
That's right. So the negative has a big ripple effect
as well, yeah,
and the positive has a big ripple effect, and that's kind of again what we were saying before, was that will just unfold by itself. So to change society, really, it's not that difficult. You just got to have to sort of work on yourself, get where you are like safe and good, then connect with other people, and then another person, and then another person, and then your village, and then your town, and then and it does it itself. It kind of goes out. But the same thing applies if you don't do that. So if I don't do any work on myself and I'm all in my mind and I'm thinking, oh, you're different from me, I'm not sure about that, do you know what I mean? You looked at me a bit funny, I better sort that out and tell the police, all that sort of stuff. That just, again, makes itself bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need to be so aware of our own influence, and I think people massively underestimate what they can do. People don't think they can do anything. They think, oh, I'm helpless, what can I do? I can't change the world. No, you can't change the world. But what you can do is look at yourself, get yourself in a good space, meet up with other people, and then together you create something in your community, and that by itself will start to change the world. We don't have to think about the world, and that's another myth that I think weirdly is being said, is that, oh, you can change the world. That's too big. Don't even try.
Start with yourself, start with your family, your friends, your local peer groups, and then from there your local communities, wider communities, wider society.
And it will do it itself.
And
that again is back to the biblical
fantastic insight that you have.
Yeah, well, again,
it's bringing as well.
But it's back to the biblical thing you were talking about, isn't it? It's sort of
most
love your neighbour.
Back to the second commandment is to love your neighbour as you love yourself.
And in Islam as well, it's like in their 5 pillars that they have to, the Islamic people have to pay towards helping a community. And that's great, and it's like so we need to remember, and as I said, I don't know why mainstream media and all this sort of stuff, and to be honest with you, things that they do to help people do tend to kind of overdo it and say, yeah, you can change the world, you can do this, you can do that, and then when you don't achieve that, you kind of feel a little bit depressed, a little bit let down, and then it demotivates you. So don't set that target, just set the target just to be you the best you can. And then see what happens out of that. Yeah. See what happens if you just say to a friend of yours or whatever, look, how can I support you today? Just see what happens. You will be amazed. You will be absolutely amazed. And in the community I'm in, because I home educate my little boy, we help each other.
Which is absolutely outstanding, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. But we have to help each other because we're better by helping each other, So if I'm one lady, for example, looks after my boy when I go to work, so in return I teach her daughter maths,
Nice.
And together we can do that, and you'll be amazed as what you can achieve if you work together. I mean, I kind of can't, I know I keep saying that, but it's just so true, and people lose that. They lose that feel they have, and instead go somewhere else with their target kind of idea of, I've got to look like I'm the best.
Fantastic points, which brings me on to my next question. Young people going to prison, entering the criminal justice system, being stereotyped, being denied opportunities, and most importantly, being denied future prospects, despite paying the penalty for the crimes they've committed and serving the crime. How destructive is that, in your opinion?
Well, the fact that, if you do something wrong, you go to prison and you serve your time. That should be that. If we're going to assume that's a good idea in the first place.
Exactly. Whose idea is this in the first place?
I know. But if we assume that's a good idea, right? Let's say you served your time, so when you come out, come on, let's give this person the best opportunity.
Yeah, another chance to be integrated back into society.
Yeah.
But that's not because they're penalised with a criminal record that pretty much limits them from applying for jobs, being integrated back into society in a positive, constructive, beneficial way, not only to society but to local communities.
Yeah.
That opportunity is taken away.
Yeah.
That is destructive.
It's very destructive.
Why is that? And why has nothing been done?
Well, as I said, I do think there are people who work in the prisons and things like that who have got good intentions. I think that they do have good intentions, and some people within that system can make a difference by being human. I mean, you do hear stories of people who've met people staff who do turn it round. But I think that's despite the system. You know, it's despite what they're trying to do. It's just because the human element of that person inspired that other person, you know. So I don't know why. It is very destructive. A lot of people who commit crimes are in prison because of their situation, you know?
Or their circumstances
exactly.
that they've been placed in.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, forced to do X, Y, Z, or cornered to do. That's right. People or make choices that they are limited in making.
Yeah. People don't wake up in the morning, like they were perfectly all right one evening, and they wake up in the morning and they think, I'm going to go and commit a crime. That doesn't happen. There's a lead up to it.
Yeah, and if we're sending young people to prison to be rehabilitated, to change, to develop, but the very essence of the system is to make financial gain off of each inmate. Yeah. Because each inmate brings a particular amount of money per profit per person. Yeah. So it's a business. Yeah, it is, yeah. So with the prison system and the criminal justice system being a business, how then can we see young people being reformed, young people being given chances to be reintegrated back into society? We're not going to see that.
No, and this is why I think we've got to do it ourselves. In a kind and humble way, right? Working with each other and reaching out and doing everything we possibly can to prevent people going to prison. And when they do come out of prison, if they end up going to prison and they come out, we need to be there for them.
Because what happens is they get a criminal record, they come out of prison, they can't get a job, so they continue the same lifestyle that led them into prison and go back to prison again, and that's the cycle.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree with you. And we need to break that cycle. And again, I know the institutions, you know, they on paper, they're like, well, we're doing this, we're doing that, but it's not working, is it?
Oh, clearly
I mean,
not.
if and this is the same with mental health, actually. I mean, things are much, much, much worse now. They're much worse now than they were 20 years ago. You know, why is that?
And we have to ask ourselves, what is this system, was it designed to work? Was that its purpose, or was it designed to make money? Why does prison make young people worse than when they first enter the criminal justice system, in your personal opinion?
Well, in my personal opinion, it would make someone worse because they are stuck in a cell like for however long. They're again just sort of in a separation. No one's really helping them. They meet other people who are in a similar situation, and although in a way that's kind of good because, you know, you're all together, it can also be very negative because you can be influenced by someone who's maybe, you know, not so good for you. And then you kind of get used to it a little bit. So when you go outside, you know, into society again, it's probably a bit scary. It's a little bit, you know, what's going on? How do I fit in again? You know, everyone's going to think of me because of this, that, and the other, and blah blah. And you've got to sort of start over, and that it's hard starting over. You know, just moving house. You know, let alone coming out of prison. You know, especially if you're young.
With the negative stereotypes that come with going to prison and coming out of prison.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably totally traumatised. You will be totally traumatised. So that in itself will breed sort of more mental health problems and you know, that's again a very negative...
And it just feeds into this negative agenda, this negative system and this negative society at whole.
Yeah, it does.
You know, that young people are sucked into generation after generation is what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, and again, and that's why I really think we need to change the tune. It's not good enough to just help people in that system. We need to change the tune. We need to offer something different, and I do think that's down to the people. You know, I really do. I'm not.
But some would say that it's not down to the. Some would say it's down to those that are in government, those that are in power.
But they're not, are they?
Because we put them in power.
Well, I suppose we do, but what choice have you got? You know, we haven't. All the politicians are kind of saying the same thing anyway. The system's set up anyway. It's just like, is that making a difference? Voting different people in.
Maybe we need to address politics.
Yeah, we will, absolutely, and
legislations and laws.
Absolutely. There's no sort of harm in that. But as we're sort of saying, that the problem is that the people in themselves are slowly becoming less human because of lots of different reasons. You know, bad diet, loads of technology,
social media, young people becoming desensitized. Poor agenda teaching. All these crazy homosexual kind of stuff in school to kids at a young age, teaching two parents, same gender parents, all this diabolical, devilish stuff is what's really also fueling these young people to become lost as they are, having an identity crisis, not knowing that a man and a female are supposed to be together. That's the normal way of reproduction. Of nature. It's the way of nature. That's how we got here. And teaching against that grain, I feel it also is, really has a negative impact.
It causes confusion. It causes conflict and everything. It's confusing. It's as simple as that. And the thing is that, when people start off confused, that's not a good place to start off, especially if you're very young.
Definitely.
And what also can happen is it can cause conflict as well, because you can't sort of, you go to school, learn one thing, you go home and it's like, well, the parents might not like that, or etc., or vice versa, and that causes a conflict, and you're kind of separating then children from parents, so it really is quite like crazy out there, I think, But
I like what you said, it starts with us. In terms of, if we really want to see change and to implement change and apply change, it's got to start with us individually. Myself, yourself, my neighbour, caring for my neighbour, loving my neighbour.
That's right, and it doesn't really matter, getting back to differences, I mean, with their sexuality and all that, it doesn't matter in the sense of, so long as we value everyone's contribution, and respect that, that's all we need to do. We don't need to be kind of like taught who we are. I think that's it. You can't be taught who you are by giving you a menu of, well, you can choose to be this, because who you are is who you are.
Yeah, and these young people are not given the opportunity to explore who they are. There's an agenda pushed on them. In schools at a young age. And that these agendas wasn't taught when I was in school, and they probably wasn't taught when you was in school. It's only the last this generation, literally. The generations before was unheard of.
I mean, it's literally mind-blowing.
What they've put in the curriculum is diabolical.
Yeah, and what fascinates me is that, as I said, as we'll talk about a bit later, we do know who we are, actually.
Which we're going to get to when we get through your power tower and talk about that.
We do know who we are, but what's happening is, again, because of technology and all sorts of stuff, we're becoming so confused that we kind of need to work it out through our mind, through rational stuff. And what's happening is that you're being given a menu of options that actually takes you away from how you are. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, when I was young, I used to like playing football or making go-karts, right? But I was a woman, I was a girl. That wouldn't have crossed my mind. I wasn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Because it's separate.
Yeah.
But nowadays it'd be like, and it's just like, that's really strange.
Times have changed, haven't they? Brings me on to my next question. Why is racism still so strong within our communities against young black men, but not just against young black men, young Asian men, non-white men? Why is it still so prevalent within our society?
Because people are very scared of each other. And I'll tell you the other thing that's happening a lot at the moment is the immigration sort of problem as it is described in mainstream media.
I was about to say, is it a problem?
As described by the mainstream media.
Was it a problem when these immigrants were building the country?
Exactly.
Building the roads, building the schools.
I know.
Building the housing estates.
I know. And you look at how that's been sort of set up, how it's been framed.
Labouring for nothing, working for nothing, living in atrocious conditions. Was it a problem then?
No.
It wasn't, was it?
No, it wasn't.
But now all of a sudden it's a problem.
Yeah, and a lot of the, I'm sure you're aware, a lot of the institutions of Britain, the hospitals and the transport and all that, blah de blah, it's like that because of immigration. Do you know what I mean? It's again, this is what I mean. We've all contributed to create that. We've all.
This country was built off the back of slaves.
Yeah, we've all contributed.
These roads.
Yeah.
Historically, is facts.
Yes.
So now to say that there's a problem.
Yeah. But it's the way it's also done. What's been done is that they are putting some of these immigrants into places like hotels that the locals are totally horrified about, because it just scares them, and it's got rid of their nice hotel and all that. I mean, how bad is that for everyone? How bad is that for everyone? It sets the local community into a state of absolute fear and panic. The people who are being put in the hotels probably are really not happy about the whole thing either. They're probably totally traumatised from getting there in the first place. Do you know what I mean? And so you're immediately setting people to fight. Immediately. And that's today. That's today. So what have we learned as a society? What have we learned about how to again, be kind to our neighbour and to help each other? What have we learned? In fact, it's got worse, hasn't it? It's got worse.
Most definitely.
So I would say a big factor is what is said in the mainstream media. I think a big factor is the politics, as you say, it's the politics. But even that could be overcome if people decided to actually, again, do the work, stop being scared, and welcome each other, and helped each other, and then it would be okay. And I know this sounds idealistic, but it can happen. It can happen, and I just wish people would realise that it's not idealistic. It's what we're here for. It's like saying, well, a good meal is a luxury. No, it's not a luxury. You're here to eat a good meal.
It's a fundamental. It's the base. It's a basic necessity.
Yeah.
And until we start valuing people and valuing ourselves as that,
yeah,
we're not going to see change.
That's right. And I'll tell you something else as well on your question, is that when you speak out about this sort of thing, a lot of the time people who are speaking out are from an ethnic minority, because they are probably suffering more. Okay. So then it's like, oh, well, because they're an ethnic minority, they're more aggressive, or they're more, got attitude or whatever, when actually they're only telling the truth, actually. Do you know what I mean? And that perpetuates it. So I think a lot more people who are not ethnic minorities need to speak up about this, because it affects everybody. What is your problem is also my problem, because we are in this together.
And thank you so much for even taking the time to come out and speak on such a delicate and sensitive topic. As you know, Voice for Youth Against Violence is about empowering the communities, changing lives. You've designed a phenomenal educational tool, the Power Tower. Could you kindly just explain to us what that's about, what made you come up with that idea and how it works? Thank
you, Jermaine. I will. So I've spent lots of years, 30 years or so, working with people in different situations. I've worked with all sorts of different people. I've worked with millionaires, I've worked with drug addicts, I've worked with people with learning difficulties, people on probation, that sort of thing, people with disabilities. And I got into this through working in employment and helping people with disabilities. Then I worked a little bit in mental health. And what I noticed was fascinating to me. Back to what we were talking about before about help that's out there. I mean, there is help out there, and that can do good, right? But you need to do a holistic help, which is nearly always to do with the situation a person is in. It's not just to do with the person's issue. It's to do with the situation they're in, and it's also to do with how they are. And most people don't really look at their situation, and they don't really look at how they are. So I noticed a pattern, and I could tell you so many examples about this, and maybe we can do another chat about this, because I've got so many.
We'll definitely be doing a part 2.
And a lot of my evidence, because this is all evidence-based, I went in there totally fresh. I've got 2 degrees, but they're in economics. They are not in sociology, they're not in psychology or nothing. So I went in there fresh, and I worked in Brixton, I worked in Stockwell in the 1990s with long-term unemployed. And I saw people in, and I used to, they had to do a training course, otherwise their gyro was stopped, right?
You wouldn't want that, would you?
So every Monday morning, there was me, I was about 22, little white girl in Brixton, with 19 people who are long-term unemployed, having to sit in a room together. Anyway, and I had to keep them in that room. And after about 2 weeks, I sort of thought, I'm going to do this as like a performance, because I used to do acting. So anyway, cut long story short, people in that room came in really aggressive, really scared, really angry, etc. And I'm not kidding. I worked with over like 2,500 people in this time, because I worked there quite a long time. And every single person by Friday was better. Every single person. And
That's phenomenal.
Thought, how did that happen? Because it wasn't me, see, I'm not like magic, it wasn't me. What happened was, because they felt safe, as in I wasn't going to have a go at them, and we had to sit there, and I said, look, don't worry about it, I'm not going to embarrass you, we're just going to get through the week. They started to talk to each other. And by Wednesday, normally it's a week course, they started to make friends, and by Friday, they actually were quite positive. And they were surprised at themselves about how they did it. Anyway, that's just one example. I've got loads of examples. So over time, I thought I saw a pattern, and I saw a pattern of how we operate. And what I don't understand is why this isn't taught, to be honest. That baffles me. But anyway, so I had this idea, and I started to write it down. A bit of a long story again. And then I had a client. I used to work privately with people, because eventually what I did was set up my own business. And I had a chap who was good at carpentry, and I'd written 2 books about this, and I had an idea about how we worked, and he needed something to do, and he was good at carpentry. So I said to him, can you make this for me? And I drew it, and he made it. And that was my first power tower, and I used to have it in my office. And then I was talking to one young person, actually, who was a musician, and he was really angry, and I was trying to explain what that literally looked like. And he was sort of struggling, and I thought, I'm going to use that tower to show him. So I picked it up and I put it in his hands. I said, right, if you haven't got that bit and you haven't got that bit, that'll make you angry. And he was like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah. He went, all right then. And we had a bit more of a chat, and he walked out, and he was never angry again, because he got it. He saw, that's what I'm angry for, so I'm just going to change my situation.
He was able to understand. You was able to, illustrate and reflect his emotions and situation through something he could understand.
Exactly.
Through a medium.
And it's that simple. So it's a little bit like, exactly. So it's a little bit like, if we're trying to describe the colour red, how do we see what that looks like? If I show you a red apple, we immediately know, so we can talk about the apple. Right? We don't have to worry about the red, we can talk about the apple. So what this model does is it shows you how you work, how everyone works. So once we understand that, we don't have to spend time on that. We can then look at your situation and see what is good for you, because what will be good for you will be different for what is good for me. And then we identify that. We can identify what blocks we might have because of trauma. And we can realise that with love and care and like support, like proper support, like mentoring is a really good one. I'm sure you know that. Mentoring is really good support.
Yeah, definitely.
And people who you can talk to when you need to, and opportunities, that's the sort of support you need. And being able to identify your talents and your strengths, and then get support for what you're not so good at.
And to be nurtured.
Yeah. You will then...
and be, put in a safe place.
Yeah.
So you can grow.
Yeah. So what this model does is physically show you how you work, so we can get straight on with the practical. you know. So shall I show you?
Yeah, please. Are you able to show us?
Yeah, so that's for you. And this is for me. So this is all very, very symbolic. The stick represents who you are. And as you can see, there's some symbols on that stick. And this little white circle there represents your awareness. So you're aware of your stick self. You're aware of who you are. Some of the things on that stick is your talent, your preference, your learning style, your knowledge, and your mindset, right? So that's who you are. And what we have to do then, around the stick, we then place these circles. Now these golden circles here represent your good feelings, okay? They represent your good feelings. So if you can show that, you create that, all right? So they're your good feelings. They're golden because you are the pot of gold. But how do you get there? If you look at this, in the words on the white illustrate a thought, okay? So I do, I know, I am, we create change in a kind and humble way, I can. If we say that and do that, given who we are, so what it will be like, look like for me will be different to Jermaine because we're different, we got a different talent or whatever. If you know you're who you are, if you do your good thoughts, you create your feelings, and I'll demonstrate, right? So if we create change, if Jermaine and I do this video, we're creating change because we are changing our reality moment by moment, and everyone can do that. But we're both doing something that we're good at, okay, which is relevant to our who you are. So if we create change, what feelings does that create? It creates
meaning and purpose.
Meaning and purpose. So you know you're creating meaning and purpose, and it can work the other way around. So if someone says, well, I haven't got any meaning and purpose, you think, okay, well, you need to, in your day, create a bit of change in your day, given your stick self. And I'm not kidding, it is that simple.
It's phenomenal.
It's really simple.
Easy to understand, and really for somebody who maybe is not academically as intelligent or capable, or maybe, you know, not able to read or maybe have difficulties, this is a fantastic piece of tool to look at and be able to see exactly who you are and what you need to do to create change.
Yeah, well, it's quite funny you should say that, because that's true, but actually it's actually really effective, because people who maybe struggle in the normal mainstream area actually normally know this already, to be honest. They get it really quick. They're like, oh yeah, I get that. But the people who struggle with it are people who are quite successful normally, because this one here represents the mind. You see that success, it represents the mind. Now, we need a clear mind to achieve success, right? We need a clear mind. Now, most people are focused on that mind, again, because of technology and all this, that and the other. They're focused on that. And because they're focused on that, like right back to the beginning of this interview, they find it really hard to focus on that. Because it's not a feel, it's an emotional thing, right? So what this does is it helps people to focus on who they are and their golden bits. It helps them focus. And a lot of people who are too thinking all the time about their success, I've got to do this, 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 they really struggle with actually getting the hang of a feel. So I mean, I think schools should have this in their classrooms. I think prisons should have these.
Most definitely.
To help
all
people.
Educational institutions really need it.
It's focus. It's a physical thing. It's a physical thing, and it's a focus. And the way your brain works, if your brain can feel and see and touch, you're already halfway there.
You can make sense of the situation, or the situation you're in, a bit more.
Yeah.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Absolute pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you for joining us on The Realest Show Out. Do not forget to like, do not forget to leave a comment down below, and do not forget to subscribe. Until next time.
Shouts to my bro, been there through the darkest times. It's fucked how me and the guys in my circle could have got done for numerous crimes. I don't cap for attention, but female energy now sometimes. Chilling out yard gets boring, studios where I'm trying to spend most of my time.